How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tear Talk. Guys, today we're going to talk about the growth of discernment and experience in correction. So me and Russ had a dialogue yesterday. We were discussing 11 signs that may showcase that your housing unit or yard, whatever, is about ready to erupt. And it was a great dialogue, and we talked about the signs in isolation, and then eventually we discussed how the signs can interplay. And that's where it becomes extremely complex. But then me and Russ were talking. We're like, you know what? When you teach a rookie, you're going to teach them, obviously, these steps in isolation, but there also should be some effort to let them know how these signs interact. And that's where discernment comes in. That's where experience comes in, because senior staff, they've been there before. They've dealt with this before. They know exactly what the puzzle needs to look like. They know the end result. So when the rookie is trying to figure out which piece they are holding, senior staff is able through experience to kind of tell them, hey, this is what the picture needs to look like. And this is a good thing, right? Because if you're only teaching staff the isolated signs with no context and how they connect, it's very easy for the rookie staff to then become paranoid because they don't see the bigger picture. And that's why the senior staff may be a little bit more less emotional, if you will, because again, they know how everything connects. And I think it's going to be a great discussion here, because me and Russ had a discussion last night and then worked on something today that I really do think would be a great course, but we're going to speed through it a little bit because there's a lot to cover. But no, if this is ever wanted by your agency as a course, we can make it happen, but it's a definitely it would be a few hour course. It's a lot of information here. And basically the information is, how do you progress a rookie to be an experienced officer? How do you teach them how to utilize discernment? That's the key, basically developing intuition. And there's also something else I want to mention before the show starts. So I've been looking at a lot of my older episodes and seeing what thoughts stay true, what thoughts may have ventured a little bit away from, or we've evolved. And another discussion we had in the past that made me revisit it when we were trying to discuss this episode was, where should an officer start first, max or min? I was very big on starting the officers off in max because I wanted them to kind of learn, how to basically what am I looking for here? Like the games, throw everything at them. And after listening to Russ on the older dialogues and just kind of really understanding the perspective a little bit more, I actually going to start leaning towards Russ with starting them in a lower level, like a minimum. And I'll explain why real quick. When you're introduce someone to the profession, all they have at the very beginning are policies and procedures, and they need to address conflict at the very beginning of their career. So they're going to have to try it out with individuals who have stuff to lose. It just makes more sense. They're going to have to try out that level of authority with individuals that have stuff to lose, because the very first thing that rookies have are going to be leaning on policy and procedure. It's the first half of the lost first gain system. So if you put them in areas that are close custody where the inmates have already lost everything, it puts the rookie in a very awkward spot. It really does, because they don't have that discretionary effort that you would see more balanced with the senior CO. So now, in an effort to revisit my older material, I am going to have to agree that maybe max isn't the best setting for a rookie to start off in. Because the rookies, and we're going to get to this when we break down our discussion, rookies are leaning on policy and procedure in an effort to build confidence. So they're going to have to be able to have authority and things that they can take away, but from inmates that have stuff to lose. So it would make sense to start them off in a min section first, stuff where the inmates have earned stuff that you could take away, because that will help the officer build their confidence, because they can lean on policy and procedure to aid them. So I thought that was interesting. And when the show starts, before we get into this dialogue, I want to revisit Russ's perspective on that, and then we'll cross right into the dialogue. I just wanted to mention it because looking back, and then and see where we're at now. There's a bit of a conflict where I need this dialogue to go, and the conflict was an older episode where I thought Max, but now I've been reborn. Okay, let me get Russ. What up, Russ?
Hey, good morning, Anthony. How's it going?
Good, Russ. You mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, my name is Russ Hamilton. I started my career way back in 1989 at San Quentin State Prison. From there, I eventually became a sergeant at another CDCR facility, and then I retired. And then I went back to work for a local county for a new juvenile facility that was the first one built in California in many decades. And then I went to work for a company that does rehabilitation and reentry work at a local jail and a local probation department that we have here near where I live. I'm also the founder of Keepers of Chaos, which is a Facebook group dedicated to the brave men and women of correctional law enforcement, as well as each and everyone else that also works in corrections. Really trying to showcase and sort of an ethos of teamwork together, because every one of us is a piece of the puzzle with regards to doing things safely and correctly within the Department of Corrections that we all serve.
And Russ, before we get into the dialogue, again, the dialogue is going to be about the growth of discernment and experience in corrections. I did revisit some of my older videos yesterday, and I did come across, as I said, the Max versus Min. And does that make sense in what I'm saying? Why I believe the shift, I was wrong. I think it would be better Min if we're going to allow the officer to test that level of authority, because their confidence is going to come from policy and procedure, and that's going to reflect inmates that have stuff to lose.
So one of the things that I see, like the first few places that I worked in my career in my first week was all death row. Okay. And so, death row is essentially a max unit. Unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, they had a lot of different property back then, at least what we called the grade A's. But I also worked with the grade B's, which was a much higher level of custody, but it was all max, if you want to look at it that way. And, really your interactions basically consist of, handcuffing them in their cell, bringing them out to a shower, and, this very, kind of rote. And it's very important to do those rote things correctly, but there's a very limited spectrum of what you do and how you interact with them. And so, the next spot that I worked for a few weeks was in level 4 GP. And so while that's not what you would necessarily think of as men, it is general population. They get let out of their cells, they go to their programs, they come back, they spend time on the yard. It's not a security yard. They're out there. There's officers. They come up. There's a lot of interaction. Some of those interactions are, positive, and a lot of them, are negative as well. But the number of things that you have to become good at, the number of things that you have to be exposed to, the types of things that you do, the type of searches even that you conduct, is a whole much, broader range of things that you do. Like my view of Max is that, yeah, it's dangerous, but it's limited and it's rote. And, you could put an officer and work him for decades in Max, and then have him come out to a general population unit, and he would be lost. He wouldn't have, any of the tools that you need to go in there to a general population unit and run it, effectively. And so that's one of the things that I'm real big on, is putting people into situations where they have to learn, where they have to adapt, where they have to observe, where they have to ask questions, and where they have to find solutions to the problems with which they're affronted. And so that And so that's just, my viewpoint on things. And you can take it or leave it. I was lucky in the fact of, what I was exposed to at the beginning of my career is I would work a couple of weeks in like maybe the adjustment center at San Quentin, max, and then maybe I'd go work in Alpine, which was level 4 GP. And then, I'd go over and I'd be working in West Block, which at that time was reception center. And so I would, or, even what they called H unit at the time, which we had all of these, crazy, smelly, stinky, falling apart trailers down in this area. And, I think that was level 2 at the time, or the ranch out at San Quentin, which didn't even have a perimeter around it. And so I got to see a lot of different things, and it's being put into those positions where you see a lot of different things. You experience a lot of different levels of custody, that actually, I think, makes you able to take all these, different dots and connect them in your mind as to how the whole thing works. If you work the same unit only day in and day out, and you only know about that custody situation, and you only know about, what goes on in that type of unit, you really get a shortened, small view of what's going on. It's not a world view. It's just kind of like, well, what goes on at this jail or this pod or whatever. I was lucky in that I got to see a lot of different things, especially at the beginning of my career, if that makes sense. And so I think that is the best way to train people is to give them all those differing views and experiences, because there's really nothing like it. I could go from like I say, working the adjustment center one day, which contained most of our grade Bs or safekeepers, very dangerous safekeepers, by the way, too, from other counties there. And the next day I could be down at the ranch, and everyone's just kind of milling about, and a very different setting. There's no walls, no wire, no fence, really. They could book out of there if they wanted to. And so being able to have something other than just starting in max, where you do these rote things, I think, sets the basis for the rest of your career, if you will.
Yeah, because guys, I wrote a lot of books. You'll see them in the description. One of the most recent books I wrote that's published by Blue 360 is Managing Inmate Behavior. And it does mention the importance of at first chasing after conflict and writing the charges. And you need to write the charges, but you also need the inmates to be feel that, they have stuff to lose, or else it doesn't work. So with that said, I do now believe that when an officer comes in, you want them to kind of get involved with conflict. You want them to figure out how to utilize their authority, and they are going to lean on policy and procedure first. So you have to put them in an area where inmates do have stuff to lose, because that's how the officer at first is going to operate. And then eventually they start to develop some level of discretion. But again, it was just a revisit. So this is how I broke it down. We got 5 stages, and this is how the growth of discernment and experience in correction. This is how it works. This is how you kind of move from being that reactionary rookie to a more experienced staff member. But this is more of an effort to put things together. How do you connect the dots, as Russ said? So we're going to go through foundational knowledge first, then awareness and observation, then applied understanding, then strategic execution, and then obviously at one point we're going to say mastery. But what we mean by mastery, you're never really a master in this profession. But with that said, it's just more of an elevated understanding of what you're able to do within your prescribed role. So I said the growth of discernment and experience in corrections can be broken down into developmental stages that reflect the rookie's progression into a seasoned professional. These stages highlight how discernment evolves over time through training, mentorship, and real-world experience. So we're all a part of helping this rookie become who they need to become. But I wanted to note something, though. Each stage each step I focus on 7 things, except for the last step, which is 6 things, and it'll make sense. So one is we have the focus. So this highlights the primary skills, mindset, and responsibilities officers should concentrate on at each stage of their development. Then you got the characteristics, describes the behaviors, tendencies, and areas of growth that officers typically exhibit at each stage. So this is good to know because one, this if I'm a rookie and I'm coming in, it makes sense if I'm doing these things, but it's also good because it is behavior that's observable that senior officers also see it. It should be something that's expected. Then you got how discernment develops. You have developmental goal. So this identifies the key objectives for officers to achieve as they advance through the stage or step, ensuring they build a solid foundation for the next level. Then you have how discernment develops. So that explains how officers gain insight, intuition, and judgment at each stage through experience, mentorship, and reflection. Then you got how inmates may test you at each level. Provides real-world examples of how inmates challenge officers' authority, consistency, or emotional control, and how these tests evolve as officers progress. They get less, but you'll see. What's expected from senior staff and supervisors at that level. So details how experienced staff can guide, mentor, and support officers at each stage, ensuring they feel included, confident, and prepared to succeed. And then you got the transition. That demonstrates how officers naturally move from one stage to the next as they develop competence, confidence, and authority. And that's why mastery only has 6. There's no transition. You are at a stage where you should be okay to kind of develop that discretion and start applying it. So there's a lot here. So Russ, what I thought I could do is I could go over the quick foundational knowledge, break down the 7 parts, and then you kind of we'll explore what we feel is necessary just to give people an understanding of the dialogue. Now, guys, if we were to do a class on this, we would break down every bullet. It is what it is. But for sake of time here, we're just going to kind of sum up each section because there's a lot here, guys. There's a lot here.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think it would be good, Russ. So I'm going to go over the first section we have is going to be, this is when a rookie comes in. So step 1 is foundational knowledge, learning the rules. So you got to figure right off the bat, at some point, hopefully they go to the academy first. Sadly, some facilities don't do it that way, but the academy provides the rookies with a foundation of knowledge that we hope to cultivate. So again, for people that are telling the rookies, forget everything you learned in the academy, stop saying that. Because you got to cultivate the rookie from somewhere. So the academy is what gives the officer that anchor. It gives them a foundation. So now they can apply the knowledge that eventually is going to come their way through working in the facility. So their focus right off the bat when they come in should be about understanding policies and procedures and basic facility operations. We also want them following protocols without much room for flexibility or adaptation. Okay, because again, they're just learning the game. So if you don't know the rules, you don't know why it applies, you're not going to be able to maneuver much. So you got to kind of stay focused. And again, when a rookie comes in, their confidence is going to really relate to policy and procedure. That is their what motivates them to chase conflict. And that makes sense. The characteristics. So what do you expect to see from a rookie at this point? I expect to see heavy reliance on training manuals, and supervisors and supervisors for decision-making or their peers. I expect them to have a limited understanding of the nuances in inmate behavior or facility dynamics. I expect that. And I expect emotional responses to high-stress situations due to lack of experience. I know that's something that Russ is going to want to explore later on. I know that because I know Russ. What are my developmental goals for this rookie? Now, granted, guys, I wish that we would take people from the academy and put them on this type of progressive scale, but we don't. But maybe this is something we could develop because nowadays, our rookies, they need to know that they're going towards something. So each time they're assigned to something, how does this meet this criteria? So developmental goals, what am I looking to have this rookie understand right off the bat? Developmental goals is I want them to build a solid understanding of the rules and expectations. So this is the what. This is the what. This is the what of what we do, not the why, the what. Let's get them to understand the what. And then we want them to learn the importance of consistency and enforcing policies. And that's a very big part. I'm sure Russ will mention too, because inmates look for us to break away from that consistency. So you want staff to kind of reinforce that. So you want the officers to practice that level of authority. You want to basically have them chase conflict in an effort to produce some level of consistency in how they're going to be, how they're going to run. I expect zero tolerance for rookies at the very beginning of their journey. Now, how does discernment develop? Now, this is at the very first stage. Rookies begin to grasp the what of their role, focusing on task and checklist. Very surface. Early exposure to real-world scenarios introduces the complexity behind the rules. It just introduces it. But right now, as I said, I just want them to understand the what. Focus on the task I'm giving you, and then it's very surface. How inmates may test you at this level. Inmates often test rookies at this level aggressively during this stage to assess the boundaries and emotional control. This is where we always tell rookies, you got to be zero tolerance at this level. You know, it's very reactionary, I get it, but you got to be zero tolerance because you are going to be tested pretty overtly to some extent. Sure, some subtle, but some very overt because they want to see if you can hold your ground, and you have to hold your ground. The examples could be testing consistency by asking for exceptions to rules or using intimidation or exploiting uncertainty. The inmates also watch for reactions such as hesitation, fear, or excessive leniency to identify weaknesses that they can exploit later. And the last part I have here before we talk about the transition, I want to get to Russ, but I want to do one more part, and then we'll do the transition in the next stage, is what's expected from senior staff and supervisors to help these rookies during this first step. This is what I got. We create an environment where rookies feel included and supported, so they're comfortable learning without fear of judgment. We provide clear, consistent instruction and feedback to help rookies enforce policies confidently. Then we observe rookies' interactions with inmates, that's key, and step in when necessary to prevent early manipulation. That means you're allowing the officer to step in and practice their authority, but you're also in the background. You're not letting them be played by the inmates, but you're letting them kind of feel empowered. It's a very fine balance of letting them feel empowered, but also kind of watching what they do. And that also helps the officer, by the way, as a rookie, try it because they know that you're not micromanaging them, so they can start building their confidence, but they also know you'll step in when needed. And then I have emphasized the importance of consistency and neutrality to avoid favoritism or undue influence. So, Russ, there's a lot there. I got from what the rookie needs to focus on, what we expect to see, their characteristics when they are focusing on that. What are we trying to develop them into in that first stage, that first step, where their discernment begins to develop. I have where the inmates may test you. I found it to be a little bit more overt, and I also found they'll try to get you to back away from levels of consistency. And then which actually, whether they do it overtly or subtle, they're still trying to get you to break away from being consistent. And then what the senior staff need to do to make sure that this rookie makes it through stage one, which is the foundational knowledge. So basically, how do we take the lessons of the academy, make sure that's a strong enough foundation so we can start cultivating the rookie to where they need to be. So there's a lot there, Russ. So take your time. I would love to hear what you got on that.
Okay, so the first thing, of course, that I want to address is the foundational knowledge. I feel comfortable in saying that right off the bat, places that do not send their personnel immediately to the academy before stepping in and trying to take over some duties are doing it wrong. Because what you're going to do is you're going to potentially just expose them to maybe some bad habits of some other staff, and they're not going to have a working foundational knowledge of what happens inside the correctional sphere, especially as it relates to constitutional rights, especially as it relates to state law, especially as it relates to case law, and then also as it relates to policy and procedure, because they're just kind of walking in there blind, never having had to function in that type of environment. So the first thing that I necessarily want is I want them to have a good understanding. I want them to have had a good class on case law. I want them to have a good class on state and federal law with regards to what we can and can't do to inmates, because there are some things out there that can take away your liberty and your career if you do them. And then after that, I want to see them, exposed to a learning mindset as to how we go about, transitioning from things like a disciplinary write-up to the next step up that we might have to immediately go to with regards to use of force. And I want them to be able to understand and articulate, how we get there. Because when it's happening to them at that moment that they might be having a conflict, at the outset, especially with having in mind, people's rights and policy and procedure, it's easy for them to get mired down into, into the mechanics of the situation and trying to think it through when what it really requires is a knowledge and an outset that automatically determines what we can do and what we should do at this point in time. So they have to really have that base foundation, and that's really where I want to start. And then as we progress through taking them from the apprentice stage to the journeyman stage, they should be making progress through that. They should have a lot more on the ball. But they won't unless they're exposed to these things, unless they have, good people to model themselves after, unless they actually understand what it is they're doing. Because some people are maybe not as good at grasping it. Some people maybe aren't exposed to it and just need a little training. And some people operate inside an environment that either isn't conducive to the training or is actually antithetical to the training, and that's a problem. And we've seen the outcome of those things most recently.
Yeah, Russ, I wanted to ask you just two things here when it comes to the characteristics. I thought that you would like to explore on. I mean, you did do the Strong Academy Foundation, but I wanted to ask you, well, one is the emotional response to high stress situations due to lack of experience. Should we expect that from our rookies?
Yeah, and that's why we want to make sure that we at least try and pair them off when we understand that the situation that we're sending them into or that we're getting ready to respond to might be in that high stress category. We want them to hopefully have gone through some drills so that they can get that kind of inoculation to stress, that they functioned under some uncertain circumstances. Drills should not be predictable, but drills should also not wander so far off the reservation that they're things that they're unlikely to come across. They should be things that they're likely to come across. And then, they should be put into a position where they have to deal with that, but with, adequate backup, adequate supervision, by people who are more experienced and that can bail them out if necessary. Sometimes, we don't always have that luxury, but these are the things that we should be trying to do. We should be trying to, build their confidence, build their skill set, and build, all of those abilities that they're going to need, like communication, command, presence, knowledge of that policy and procedure, and be proficient with the tools they've been given, whether that's a taser or pepper spray, baton, 40 millimeter, whatever it is, that we're responding to things so that they know what to do when they get there.
Yeah, and Russ, and one last thing for Foundation One. I mean, guys, there's so much here we can explore. That's why, again, if you're ever interested, we'd be willing to teach this. I think this will provide a serious help for that gap we have now with experienced and inexperienced, or rookies versus seniors. Is, Russ, when it comes to discernment, I did have two notes here. I have rookies begin to grasp the what of their role, focusing on task and checklists. And I always separate the what from the why, and we'll get to the why in the next step. And then early exposure of real-world scenarios introduces the complexity behind the rules. I wanted to ask you, when it comes to discernment and when it comes to just focusing on a task at first, how important is that? Because I feel, and again, I'm learning, guys, as we do these shows, and this is great that we have these discussions. But, in our rush to move our rookies forward, we do have to make sure that before we introduce them to complexity, because everything about corrections could be complex, it's good for them to understand the task. I do agree that you want to introduce them to the why, and I made that within the second step. But I think there'll be no true understanding of the why until the person does understand the what needs to be done. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Oh, absolutely, and that's why when taking a rookie down to go enter a housing unit or something, and we just tell them, hey, this is what our goal is. This is what I'm expecting. But you got to be careful. Saying just because that's what we're expecting, that does not mean that that's what we're going to run into. And then set a goal. Hey, we're going to search 2 cells, or whatever it's going to be, and then with an expectation. Hey, when we come across something that's at whatever level of a disciplinary measure, I want you to try and find this, and then write that charge with regards to that inmate, and kind of cut their teeth in a way that lets them know what that experience is like. Hey, inmate, you know what? You have alcohol in here. You're getting written up for it, and then make sure you guide them along the way. What else do we have to do? Just because we found alcohol, is that all we do that write it? No, we're going to put that guy in cuffs, and we're going to go get him medically cleared, and we're going to make sure that he's not a danger. And all of the little other things that are indicators of a much more polished professional. Because I've seen some people that come up and they're just so completely hands off that maybe they write that charge and maybe they don't, and that can be dangerous. Well, did you know he was drunk? Well, I only knew that he had Pruno, and then they're left to explain to themselves. No, we have to make sure that we hold their hand for a ways along this transition, and that they can articulate what it is they're doing and why they're doing it. Why do we handcuff the inmate? We handcuff him for our safety. Why do we take him to medical? To make sure he's not drunk and that he's not going to end up a problem, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour from now, so that they understand what it is they're doing. Because if it's just a process to them, they may not get it because they have not been put in that position of having to, fight a drunk inmate before.
Yeah, and guys, the academy does provide the what. In some cases, they'll provide the why, but you need to understand the what a little bit, or what you need to do before you start really placing that why, that deeper level understanding. So for the next step, I have awareness and observation. So the transition to step 2 should be, as rookies become more familiar with the rules, they start recognizing patterns in inmate behavior and the importance of consistency. The initial aggressive testing by inmates may decrease slightly as rookies develop confidence and emotional control. And there we go again. Consistency comes up again. Now, guys, if you ever see this in the PowerPoint, you'll see that we kind of put everything in 5 steps. So this is where focus is at step 1, focus is at step 2, step 3, and you can actually see it in steps. Same thing with characteristics and so forth down the line. You can actually see the gradual growth. So for step 2, now we have awareness and observation. So this is the North Star. So when you're at the first step, this is, where you're headed next. So you need awareness and observation. So this is recognizing patterns and introducing the why. So here's your focus. You're going to be moving beyond task completion to observing and understanding inmate behavior, beginning to see connections between individual actions and broader facility dynamics. That's sort of what Russ mentioned before, or Russ was going into. So we can maybe explore that a little bit more. Learning the why, understanding the purpose behind rules, procedures, and decisions, which builds confidence and intentionality. Guys, real quick, when you're in the academy, even if they do address a little bit of the why when they're teaching you the what, because when you go to the facility, the why may differ a little bit, so when the facility teaches you how to apply your knowledge, their why matters. So it's good to understand what, but you got to stay focused on why things need to be done that way at that facility. And that's sometimes where you may be able to see a bit of a shift, but not a disrespect, just a bit of a shift. I know you're taught the academy to do it this way, and that makes sense, but we need to kind of take that lesson that they taught you and shift it a little bit. So I'm still going to give respect to what they taught you, but at this facility, it operates a bit differently. And then they'll explain why. The characteristics. So what do I expect my rookies to be doing? So I expect them to start noticing patterns such as subtle testing of boundaries or brewing tensions, increase situational awareness, but may still miss nuance cues. And then I want them to start developing an understanding of how decisions impact the group dynamic and the facility's overall safety. And guys, this is great when you're working with a mentor, we'll get to that, or a senior staff member who allows you to make decisions, but won't allow you to do something that's irreversible, if that makes sense. Me and Russ discussed this in a show before where, you may want to let your rookie make decisions that may not always be the best so they can learn from that failure, but you also have to make sure it's not irreversible. That's the key. So you want them to lean into those decision makings and let them see some of the consequences. But as a good mentor, you're also going to want to make sure they don't make a concern that you can't fix, that you can't get out of. And that was a great dialogue we had a while back. So what's the developmental goals, Russ? So for here, I got learn to identify red flags and subtle signs of manipulation, understand the why behind rules and protocols to make informed and deliberate choices. So we're going beyond the surface a little bit. And then we want to practice observing and analyzing situations before reacting. Because remember, guys, when rookies first come in, they're going to react because they're defined by policy and procedure. And this gives them a chance to chase conflict, build confidence. But eventually, we want to start getting them utilize discretion. So eventually, we want them to pull back from just reacting and to see the bigger picture. But it's okay for them at first to react because their confidence is going to come from policy and procedure at the beginning. So how discernment develops. Rookies shadow experienced staff to see how patterns and dynamics are identified and linked to facility safety. Russ mentioned a little bit of that before, but now we go a little bit more in depth. Mentorship focuses on explaining the purpose of actions, helping rookies internalize the importance of the why behind decisions. And guys, this is extremely important because understanding the why is where your discretionary efforts start to come in. Because remember, when we talked about before, when we did the signs for what, signs to look for before a housing unit erupts, individual signs with no context is just individual signs, which can make you paranoid. But the senior staff, they know the puzzle. They know what the picture needs to look like. So their in-depth understanding of, what these things can mean, not in just isolation, but how they put together is something that we want to get our rookies to start leaning into. And then I have through guided experience, rookies begin to make connections between their actions and outcomes, moving towards intentional decision-making. And this is part of the connecting the dots. Now, how inmates may test you is inmates shift to more subtle testing. Okay, now this is not as overt because you have proven yourself to be consistent. You've proven yourself to, stay true to what policy and procedure expects. So now inmates shift to more subtle testing during this stage as they recognize the officer's growing in competence. So examples, they may test your patience by exaggerating minor grievances, feigning compliance to see if the officer overlooks policy violations, or probing for signs of favoritism. Kind of like the quid pro quo that me and Russ talked about before. Inmates may also try to exploit the officer's desire to please their supervisors by acting compliant while breaking small rules. What's expected from senior staff and supervisors. Now, this is what we expect you to do to help the rookie now progress to the next stage, which would be stage 3 or step 3, is we want you to actively involve the rookies in discussions about inmate behavior and facility dynamics to build their confidence. We want you to provide constructive feedback and timely on rookie responses to inmate testing and acknowledge their progress. Gradually make rookies feel they are valuable contributors by assigning manageable responsibilities, which helps foster a sense of purpose. And we want you to explain the why behind policies and actions to help rookies connect tasks to broader goals. And ain't that the truth? With the way you have the rookies coming in, they have to see that there's significance behind the work they do. So a good senior officer or a good supervisors are going to translate that significance, but that translation comes through the why. It goes beyond the what. It comes through the why. Russ, there's a lot here too. So we're talking about now step 2, which is, as I said, awareness and observation, but it's also about recognizing patterns and introducing the why. So what's your thoughts? There's a lot here. And you notice that we put a lot on inmate dynamic because that is a big part of the rookie's growth and development.
Yeah, I think that, the important thing is to begin teaching them, the idea about, what it is that they're seeing. So they go out there and they see something and, they probably don't actually have any idea about what it is that they're actually observing. So you teach them to ask questions internally about that. Why is this group of inmates pulled away from this other little group that they're normally around, and then, you teach them to make up a story in their head, maybe that makes sense in order that they can learn to think critically, because this is a critical thinking exercise, and that they can take then and put all of those pieces together. But that's something that's kind of further down the road. But you start talking to them about it now, and then at least they can come back with their observations and tell you what it is that they are seeing at that moment, and that you can help them with regards towards puzzling it out. And part of the whole idea behind the awareness part of it is being able to picture what's going on within your unit, because all of these interactions between the STGs, between the different ethnic factions, between staff, between officers and sergeants, and officers and cooks or teachers or whatever else it is, there is an ebb and flow to that, and being able to have the type of analysis at your disposal is key. But that's something that they're only going to get to if they go through the proper steps to get there. And so we start them off slow. We question them. We give them classes. We ask them, and they can be informal classes. It doesn't have to be classroom activity, but we give them training. And we give them a chance then to develop through their own insight, their own training, their own experiences that they're slowly gathering, to be able to assess what's going on, interact with it, and eventually take their own actions. I might start with someone who's new to the profession and tell them what I want. I want you to go down, to this dorm or this cell block, go cell by cell or go through the day rooms. And I want you to, check out all of the garbage cans that you can, see if there's any pruno in them. Do that sweep for me, and then a month later, I would hope that individual, having done a number of pruno sweeps, is going to eventually, take that upon themselves, and they're going to add to it, and they're going to, do their own little thing. Maybe they're going to take a quick look in every locker and see if someone's been smuggling juice or fresh fruit or sugar or whatever it is, to try and take those things away to impact the safety and security. And hopefully at some point they go from meaningful training, how do I put this? They go from meaningful training and direction that I've given them into becoming a self-starter, where they take it upon themselves to do these things and then report back after it's done. Or maybe tell me, hey, we're going to go down here and we're going to do some type of contraband interdiction. We're going to look for phones or whatever. And they're taking the initiative, and I'm having to be a lot less involved in that, because now they know what the game is. They know what the inmates are up to, and they are out there in a position where they're starting to train themselves. And there's nothing more valuable than an officer that has learned to start training himself.
I agree. And there's one thing I have here with discernment, and it says through guided experience, rookies begin to make connections between their actions and outcomes, moving towards intentional decision making. I mean, I remember my supervisors always saying, protect Pandora's box. Don't let that Pandora's box be opened. And that's where consistency comes in, knowing that if I open it for this one, how does this now ripple? But with that said, some cases, I don't want the fear of the Pandora box stopping you from doing what should be done either. I mean, there are unique situations. That's why an experienced officer, may be able to say, hey, this wasn't a Pandora box, and I'll be able to justify why I did what I did for this one inmate. But with that said, I'm not doing it for the other ones, but this one had a special case. I'll give you an example. An inmate that they want to order sneakers. And you're telling every inmate you can't order sneakers from an outside source. Got to order from here. Nope, nope. And you're kind of don't let them order from any outside source, but what you have on commissary. But then it turns out one inmate needs a medical sneaker. I'm not going to go ahead and put that inmate with the other inmates. If medical gave me the slip that he's got to get a special sneaker, it's not a Pandora box for me, because I can lean on the slip that allows me to get it for the one inmate, which I'm supposed to do, but then still close it off on the other ones. When they teach you about not opening the Pandora's box, I agree with that. But I also want to make sure that it doesn't stop you from doing what's right when needed. But again, that's where that finesse comes in. There's nothing easy about corrections. You're always balancing on extremes. So it's in the middle. But I really thought, like, through guide experience, rookies begin making connections between their actions and outcomes, moving towards intentional decision-making. And one more question I had for you, Russ, that I wanted to ask you, what came from this part. For rookies, and it's under the characteristics, where rookies have to develop an understanding of how decisions impact the group dynamic and the facility overall safety. So sort of that Pandora's box or the ripple effect. But how do we get the rookie to start seeing the bigger picture behind their decision making? Is that really impacted by the why?
Yeah, because the why will lead you. The why will lead you to other things that require the same sort of critical thinking skills. When you understand the underlying whys behind one situation, it will give you insight into other situations. When we see, especially with STGs and with regards to, the type of, power that they try and get a hold of inside an institution or a department or things like that, when you understand, that power is usually pretty much leveraged on protection and drugs, right? You can do things to interrupt that power dynamic. And when you understand that, all power dynamics, require any particular STG or any ethnic group to be able to leverage something over someone else, then it opens your eyes to what all of the possibilities are. I had a situation with just, some guys who were, they were just in a specific ethnic group. And one guy came in, he was also in their ethnic group, but he had got a really large settlement over some type of insurance thing that had happened out in the streets. And, he left his mail laying around. And so what do? They call someone up on their illegal cell phone and have someone go take pictures and send those pictures back. And the next thing that's going on is they're extorting this guy with regards to the safety of his family. And being able to know and understand how those kind of things operate and intertwine with STGs and ethnic groups and everything else is going to put you much further ahead in the mental game with regards to trying to actually establish safety and security, within your unit, within your prison, within your jail, within your department.
Yes, and I took that the why it helps you for universal application I agree with that. That was well said, Russ, because once you know something, you're not putting things to it blindly, which means that if I know why, sometimes you see that why play out in other things. And it really does help you apply things at a higher level. It doesn't just pigeonhole you to one situation or scenario. The transition to stage 3, which is going to be applied understanding. So this part takes courage. It's applying what you've learned. Is going to be as rookies develop situational awareness and start to understand the why behind their actions, inmates may begin to respect their authority more. Testing becomes less aggressive, but manipulative behaviors remain targeted and subtle. So this is what I have. Applied understanding. This is step 3 or stage 3. Applied understanding. This is about making connections. So now this is where you start to connect the dots. This is what me and Russ talked about when we were doing that episode for 11 signs with housing units erupting. And then basically it's like, okay, you see the signs in isolation, but we got to start putting these signs together, because my biggest concern when me and Russ did the show was, if you see the signs in isolation, you could be paranoid. You know, it could cause paranoia. You got to see the bigger picture. How does this all connect to that context, to that puzzle that we're looking to try to figure out? So the focus for a rookie is going to be connecting policies and training to real world application. And you notice I did this after the why was introduced. When I first was running through this, I was trying to figure out when the connection begins. The connection comes from the what, the why. Now you connect. Understanding how actions, decisions, and responses affect safety and order, because now you're leaning into decision making. Now you're trying to connect the dots, and you are now actively and intentionally making decisions based on the greater context. You're not just reactionary anymore, or you're leaning away from being reactionary. And deepening the understanding of the why behind decisions, enabling critical thinking, like Russ said, and more importantly, adaptability. That's what we want from our officers. We want adaptability. So what do I see? What are the characteristics? I'm going to see more confidence in handling routine situations with occasional need for guidance. Occasional. Start recognizing the intent behind inmate actions, such as manipulation or group influence, because that means when the inmates are coming to you, it's more of like, well, why are you coming to me? You start to ask questions. You start to discern some level of motive, which comes from your experience in regards to past interactions and outcomes with the inmates. You're able to identify the why behind facility rules and apply them strategically. That's what Russ said. It gets introduced in step 2 or stage 2, but definitely gets applied in stage 3. And I love this, Russ. Able to identify the why behind facility rules and apply them strategically. That's why the universal application, but that's still strategic in that. Developmental goal. You begin to think critically about how to adapt responses to meet the situation needs. And then you start developing confidence in making decisions with an understanding of their consequences. That's extremely important, because now if you had a good mentor along the way, they let you fail a little bit. Not irreversible, but as I mentioned before, they let you fail, and then you learn those consequences firsthand. So now you understand the best part of decision making, how you have to deal with the outcome. How discernment develops. So we got through trial and error. Staff learn how to evaluate situations and adjust their responses. Reflection on incidents help rookies connect action to outcomes and refine their approach. And the why becomes ingrained as rookies transition to proactive rather than reactive decision making. And that is extremely important. How inmates may test you. Testing decreases further, but still exists in nuanced ways. Example, inmates, let's say seek an exception to rules under the guise of trust, manipulating the officer's growing confidence by exaggerating praise or agreement, or testing flexibility in less obvious areas. What's expected from senior staff? So I want senior staff to encourage staff to reflect on their decisions and discuss their reasoning, helping them feel comfortable innovating solutions to complex problems. That's why we kind of want to be very careful of outside of emergent situations, absolute authority, because absolute authority only gets you compliance. It doesn't get you commitment. So therefore, if you want absolute authority, you may find staff that are afraid to make decisions. So this is a chance for them to be innovative. So I just want to read this one more time. Encourage staff to reflect on their decisions and discuss their reasoning, helping them feel comfortable innovating solutions to complex problems. We want them to we want senior staff to help them gradually allow more independence while still providing support and feedback. We want staff to reinforce the importance of maintaining consistency even when trust develops with inmates. And that's extremely important. And I wasn't afraid to put this in. And I'll get to that real quick before I introduce Russ again. And then recognize their success and highlight their contribution to the team to build morale and motivation. Guys, I want to go back to that, reinforce the importance of maintaining consistency even when trust develops with inmates. I've seen this a lot with porters. I've seen this a lot with maintenance workers, or inmate maintenance workers, inmate porters, where they work and they go above and beyond. And then you wind up becoming reliant on them. And you don't want that, because that reliance turns into some level of trust. At the end of the day, an inmate could always be replaceable. Sometimes they go the extra mile because they know that at some level there's going to be a payback on that, or there's going to be such a reliance that I can get something from you in return. So usually that trust that develops with the inmates, it winds up being, and it is what it is, guys, a quid pro quo, whatever it is, an exchange. And you want to make sure that you're never at that point that you're so reliant on that inmate that reliance will wind up sacrificing your prescribed role with that inmate and what those expectations are. So, Russ, there's a lot here, too. We're introducing applied understanding. So now we're taking the courage to start applying what we've learned, especially through learning the why. So this is where, like you said before, the application becomes a bit more strategic. We start to become less reactionary and more proactive, and we start connecting things. So how does this all play out?
So when you're able to apply the understanding that you have, you will know just how deep your understanding is based on the richness of the reward that you get back from it. And so, people go through a lot of different, levels and stages within their career, as long as they never fail to keep growing. And so we want our interactions to be fruitful. We want to be able to, exert influence. We want to be able to exert control. We want to be able to, bring things to a conclusion. We want to be able to identify safety and security issues and do whatever's necessary to nip them in the bud. Sometimes those things are, as simple as, good communication. Sometimes it's a shot across the bow by writing some inmates up. Sometimes it's out there, doing things to, interdict and stop significant threats to safety and security from happening. And so there are a lot of, dots that people don't necessarily see the connections between. But a really good officer should be able to go out there and start to identify the patterns that he sees in order to become proactive and preemptive, rather than, once again, as I said before, than just to observe and respond to things. I'll never forget, and this is an easy one for me to tell because I was there and I knew what was happening. And I connected the dots, and it was a win for our side. And basically, I knew about this gang member down in this one dorm, and I knew that he was becoming a problem, and he was a great street cred, right? And so one of the things that became a concern to me is a couple of the inmates had mentioned, that he was engaged in some just, rough talk and things like that. And it kind of didn't really make any sense. It seemed to me like they were trying to get around to try and tell me something more significant about it. And so I knew that there was an issue down there. And so what I did is I was just, prepared to go down there. And on this one particular day, and I thought, we'll toss that place and we'll see what's going on. And one of my officers, good officer, but he was a little ahead of me on that, but he was doing things more from, trying to get these guys' mind right back. And so he had mentioned that, if there wasn't some changes in this dorm, that we would come in there and make some changes for them. And immediately, my tower officer had, contacted me and said, "Hey, there is some strange activity out here." And then that's when my light bulb went on and went, "Hey, yep, those guys, they weren't trying to tell me about this guy just being a little mouthy with some people in there and trying to, run shit because he was a great street crip. Something else was going on." And I knew that it was going to be real important to act on this immediately, because now I thought, well, you know what? I could have manipulated this in order to get things going down there, but now I will just take advantage of the situation. So I didn't want to make a radio transmission. So I just, walked outside my office. I saw two of my officers off to my left, and I just came down there. And as I approached him, I just gave him a little wink and said, "Hey, just walk with me, lighthearted and everything." And I started to get a little ways down toward the yard, and I had a radio transmission come in from my tower officer again. And he's like, "Hey, check the front of dorm 6 right there." And I looked, and this Grape Street guy, he was on that door. And, we don't let them do that. They're not supposed to be, like visiting door to door, but there's not a lot you can do it when you have 1,100 inmates, on that unit, and everyone's just milling about. And so I turned to my guys and I said, "Hey, I just got to see what happens." And he was watching me the whole time I walked by. And then he turned back and he started to step off of the little curb, the cement curb there. And he looked back and he saw me looking at him. And then the race was on, and he got back to the dorm, or to where the door was there. But we ended up catching him with 4 shanks on him. And, that was something that, came about at the moment, and made some adjustments. And the adjustments turned out to be just right. And it was, based on our good read of the yard and good read by my tower officers. Both of my officers that I'd seen off to my left as I was approaching them, they immediately picked up on what I was saying to them without having to, say too much. And it was a win-win for all of us. And that's where we want officers to end up, to be able to, capitalize on things as they occur, or set them in motion in such a way that they occur. And that one was really good, because all of those weapons had been hidden down in that other dorm, and they were trying to move them out in order to save them from being discovered by staff. And so that's just what I would call the pinnacle of good good critical thinking by staff, to be able to step in and do that kind of thing. And that is truly applied understanding of the dynamics of what's going on in your yard in a very tactical situation, where we might have never known that those weapons existed, except for, some very nuanced reading of what was going on down there.
Yeah, I like that word, nuance. We're using it a lot. It's good. So the transition to stage 4, which we're actually going to get ready to go to strategic execution, is by this stage, at the end of stage 3 or step 3, whatever, the officers are earning respect from inmates and colleagues. Inmates testing slows significantly as officers demonstrate confidence, consistency, and situational awareness. Notice I never said it stops. It slows down. Their testing will always be there. Stage 4, strategic execution. So we're talking about balancing firmness and adaptability. I think that's where the discretion starts to come in, but firmness and adaptability, that's the key for strategic execution. So what's the focus? What are we looking at here? So I want my rookies to develop a strategic mindset that balances enforcement of rules with adaptability. Enforcement of rules with adaptability. It seems like they're so sit on the extremes, but this is why, again, we're not just babysitters in corrections. That simple statement there truly does highlight the complexity of working in corrections at so many levels. So again, develop a strategic mindset that balances enforcement of rules with adaptability, and then anticipating outcomes and taking proactive measures to prevent issues. What are some of the characteristics? What do we see our rookies doing now? So we want to see some confidence in decision-making with fewer mistakes and a stronger sense of authority. We want them to be able to assess complex situations and recognize the bigger picture. And then we want using intuition and experience to maintain order and de-escalate conflicts effectively. Now, remember, guys, their confidence was originally coming from policy and procedure as defined. And it was very easy for them to lean on their confidence because their route was defined for them. But when they start leaning on discretionary efforts, their confidence comes from their experience. And that's a bit different. So this is a whole kind of stronger level that they have to be introduced to. So you may be still in the background, not as aggressive as you were at the very beginning, but still in the background because they're starting to find their way. I mean, their way on so many levels. So what's the developmental goals here? So transition from reacting to situations to managing them strategically. I love that. Maybe that's something Russ will explore in a bit, but transition from reacting to situations to managing them strategically. Strengthen professional relationship with peers and supervisors through collaborative problem solving. So at this point here, they're not being told what to do. They're actively involved in coming up with solutions. And hopefully the supervisors or their peers ask them, what are your thoughts on this? And use the why to craft strategies that align with facility goals and safety. How does discernment develop here? Lessons learned from past experiences shape future responses. Mentoring less experienced staff reinforces and refines their own discernment. And the why drives more strategic and calculated approaches to maintaining order. Now, how will the inmates test you here? Testing at this stage becomes rare but deliberate. Examples: inmates may attempt to exploit a rare lapse in judgment or push for subtle favors under the guise of mutual respect. And you notice I said lapse in judgment because, as I said, guys, now your decisions may not always be so defined by policy and procedure. Yes, it's foundational to your decision, but it may not be defined totally by that policy and procedure, because sometimes policy tells you what you need to do, but the procedure may have to vary because not every situation fits perfectly to a procedure. So what happens here, inmates may know that discretionary effort is what you're trying to employ. So if it's not so defined by procedure, they may question that lapse of judgment. So again, if you have true solid experience and you're leaning from your past outcomes, that helps give you the confidence so the inmate doesn't get that win, because they know at this point that may be the only area where you may lack confidence in because you're trying it out. With that said, you're leaning on your past experiences. So again, there's confidence there. And then most inmates recognize the officer's authority and avoid direct challenges. And I think that's a very important part, guys. When you start developing that discretionary efforts, you start to embrace that level of authority. And then that's where, when you start to apply it, especially here in this case here strategically, the inmates start to see ownership behind your authority. You're not just reiterating policy and procedure, but you are stepping into the role. You're owning your decisions. So now here you come in making a decision with ownership, and they may start to step back because you own that decision. It's not reflective of what policy and procedure is pushing on you, but rather how you were able to make that decision through your experience and your gained expertise. Because granted, guys, inmates will always question the why, and a weaker justification will be basing your decisions based on policy and procedure. Even though it's being done that way, when you translate that to the population, the inmates need to know that decision comes from you. It comes from you. So granted, we already know in the background, you're developing parts of your decision-making through policy and procedure. But when you want to take ownership, the inmates need to know, even though policy and procedure is telling you to do it, that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because I'm enforcing it. I'm telling you I want it to get done. And that just brings ownership to the order, at least how it's translated to the inmates. Now, granted, when you translate it to your higher ups, you're going to be leaning on the policy and procedure argument. But I just want to make sure I get the difference out there, if that makes sense. And then, and maybe Russ could explore that, maybe make a better picture of that. But basically, I'm saying when you translate it to the inmates, you own it. It's yours. But when you have to justify it, then yeah, you're going to have to explain to the supervisors why that decision was made in reflection to where maybe procedure failed and what the policy wanted to accomplish. And then the last thing was expected from senior staff and supervisors. I want to see empowered officers to mentor others and offer leadership opportunities that encourage innovation. So, guys, look at this, guys. We're training the rookies now to be senior leaders themselves. So now we're hoping that this legacy continues. Then you want trust experienced staff to handle complex issues with minimal oversight, because now they're crossing into experience. So now we're trusting them more. And then you want to celebrate their progress and highlight their value as team leaders. Hey, Russ, there's a lot there, but real quick, you understood my thing with the ownership being translated to the inmates, but then obviously if you're ever questioned by supervisors, then you have to reflect on where you may have to venture off because procedures just didn't meet the needs of the situation.
Yeah, it's this is the thing where you're really earning your money, right? Because it's all about it's about discretion. It's about discretion, within the bounds always of law, state law, and case law. There are times where policy and procedure may fall short. And you just have to be, cognizant of, where you need to be to stay within bounds, but still be able to skirt the edge. And it's a difficult thing to describe, because I've seen so many people, just get caught up and do stupid, silly things. And I've seen so many others do smart things that they were able to justify later. Strategic execution is the implementation of the tactics that we need that are how we achieve what we want. Our most basic strategic imperative, of course, is always going to be the safety and security of the institution and the public. And so when we take that to heart, we have to say, well, okay, how do we go about doing that? Well, the how is always going to be about the tactics that we choose. Those tactics have to be rooted in those things that I've mentioned: the policy, the procedure, state law, case law, federal law, and all of those things. So it's a hard thing for some people to do, to be able to think about those things versus just what their day-to-day experience inside, the prison, the jail, the unit, wherever it is that they're working. Because not everyone is really good at big picture thinking. So if you try and look at things, that are separated by those levels, the strategic level, the tactical level, and the thing that's between those two, which is the policy and the procedure, you'll almost never go wrong. But you just have to be able to do that in a manner where you're able to take those, hopefully, critical thinking skills and be able to ask what all of the really truly salient questions are about any given situation. And sometimes, I would say almost all of the time, time is not on our side. So we have to have, come to a lot of those conclusions ahead of time, so that we're able to respond quickly and effectively to the things that are going on. And this is the difference, really, truly. I actually talked in stage 3 a lot about this stage 4, because I gave you a really good example of that thing that happened to me with regards to all of those shanks being moved. But this is the point at which your officer, your person who has started out as the apprentice, is now fully within the realm of their journeymanship, if you will, where they're actually able to start doing things on their own, thinking effectively, acting decisively, and doing that under the umbrella of all of these laws and policies and procedures that they're tasked with, and at the direction of their supervisor, while still being able to know when it's correct and right, appropriate to do the whole self-starting things, to take the initiative, and to be able to carry the day. And this is the point at which the person is I won't say autonomous, but has a lot more of autonomy given to him or her, because they've proven themselves and they've gone through the process, as it were.
Yeah, and I want to mention something too on this part. So looking back over the course of my years in, obviously as a rookie, you're more tentative with your authority. You're being introduced to it, but definitely when you're in prison management like myself, or years in, either way. But I'm leaning more towards my prison management side. I've embraced my authority. I have to be at this next level, and I know sometimes inmates will question procedures because maybe they know it or whatever it is, and they have a subjective interpretation. And me as management, when they try to question it, I have the authority to do what I got to do. So I'm not really handicapped by their questioning. If they think it's that way, I don't care. I'm doing it this way. And I could justify, as long as I meet the end result, procedures have to be adapted sometimes. But again, I have the power to do that. Now, granted, I would like to empower my officers and my supervisors, especially my supervisors more so, to have the to be empowered to make adjustments to procedures when needed. Because the reason why I wanted to say you don't want to lean so much on policy and procedure, because we already know those are foundational. Well, the policy itself tells you where you got to be, but be careful with the procedure, because the inmates can manipulate procedure, especially if it's so defined. That doesn't allow you the chance to maneuver. And what they may tend to do is they want you to fall back on the procedure so they can trap you, especially if the procedure doesn't fit the needs of the situation. So with that said, that's a good moment for the officer now who's very comfortable with the process, who understands the why behind the policy being implemented. They're able to challenge that and make that decision and then justify where things failed. Where procedure just did not meet the situation. So again, even though you're leaning on the policy, I get it. It's going to aid in your decision making, but sometimes the procedure does not fit every situation. And when the inmates realize that, they may try to lean on that and cause you to second guess yourself. And that's when you have to kind of reaffirm your stance, maybe work with the supervisor to adjust whatever method, and then have to defend that. And usually good management will see that, understand where the procedure trapped you and how the inmate was trying to manipulate that to their advantage. That's why I don't like the inmates to kind of see how much reliant we are on it, even though they know we are, because when they come up and they try to enforce it, they're trying to enforce it with a subjective interpretation of what they expect you to, or how they expect you to carry it out. And they're going to try to limit your ability to maneuver when need be. So I think it's good to know that when you make a decision, this is why I'm making that decision. And even if the procedure is not way policy written, and I've already talked to my supervisors, this has been approved because this situation has not happened before, the nuance, if you will. And what's great about step 4, guys, real quick, is this is where we start to bring leaders that can help train the rookies. So we're kind of passing the baton. You figure once you get to that stage 4, step 4, you're passing the baton over. So then I would be more comfortable if someone successfully made it through these stages to give them a rookie, because their experiences are able now, hopefully they're able to translate that to the newer people coming in. So the transition I have here to the final step, which is mastery. And again, mastery is, I'm using that term very loosely, but so to transition here at the end of stage 4, step 4 is at this stage, officers are regarded as leaders and mentors. Inmates testing is rare and often subtle, as officers have firmly established their authority and respect within the facility. Now, this is the last step, so we don't have any transition, but this is basically where we see the focus. So mastery, so this is intuitive expertise, and again, hopefully in a culture that allows it. Focus, so you got operating with a high level of intuition and discernment honed through years of experience, and mentoring and guiding others to develop their own skills and discernment. Characteristics, instinctively recognizing subtle cues and patterns in behavior, anticipating issues before they occur and addressing them proactively. And then you got balancing firmness, fairness, and empathy to maintain authority and respect. I like how that words out. Let me just read that again. Balancing firmness, fairness, and empathy to maintain authority. That's with the firmness and fairness. And then the respect is with the fairness and the empathy. Developmental goal, pass on wisdom and insight to rookies and less experienced staff. Continue refining skills through reflection and adapting to changes in the correctional environment. And ebb the why into mentoring, ensuring the next generation understands the purpose behind every action. How is discernment developed? Discernment becomes second nature, allowing for quick and effective decision-making And mastery involves understanding not just what works, but why it works. Not just what works, but why it works, and adapting that knowledge to new challenges. Sadly, guys, when we are losing out on our senior officers, that's what's getting lost. We may know what works, but we don't know why it works, and that limits our universal application. As Russ said, how do we strategically apply what we're taught at a greater level? If you don't know the why, you don't know how to strategically apply it. How inmates may test you at this stage, testing is minimal to non-existent, but it still exists. Most inmates accept the officer's authority and leadership, recognizing their consistency and experience, kind of like an exchange of persistency too. Inmates will still observe for any inconsistency, but rarely challenge it directly. What is expected from senior staff? And supervisors, we got to focus on leadership, mentoring, and preparing the next generation of staff, recognize and celebrate the contributions of veteran officers, and then provide opportunities for continued growth and reflection, even at this stage. So, Russ, this is the final stage. And when I say mastery, I use it loosely, but this is more about passing the baton and keeping the legacy. So, what's your thoughts?
So, to me, mastery has, one specific requirement once you've achieved all of these other things. And that requirement is that you teach it back to those who are, either under your supervision or that are, even your peers. Because you've achieved this level, you must prove that you have mastery by teaching it back. If you can't teach it back, you don't have mastery of it. And this is the highest level that you come to in corrections. And it's not dependent on what you have on your collar. It's dependent on what you have in your heart and your mind, what your abilities are, and your ability to plant those seeds in someone else and bring them to fruition and be able to cultivate that from that person, to pass on what you've learned, to clone yourself, if you will, giving them the skill sets that you've learned, your powers of observation, your ability to think critically, your ability to act decisively, and to otherwise be the consummate professional that we need, at all of these institutions, all of these jails, all of these units, all of these prisons. And that's truly what I think, the final thing is. Yes, you may have mastery of, everything around you with regards to being a consummate corrections professional, but unless you can pass it on, and unless you train up others in the way that they need to be trained up, then you'll never be a true master. And it's really important that we do these things and that we be intentional about it, because otherwise we're never going to get out of a lot of the ruts in a lot of departments that are around here. There are plenty of departments and jails and facilities that are just waiting for someone to come along and decide that they are going to, take control of the helm, and that they are going to, right the course of the ship, as it were. And I hope that that's happening at some places. And that's exactly what it takes, though. This whole spectrum that we started up, from the person who's, starting in the academy to the absolute master. And believe me, to be a master, you also have to be a leader.
Right, and I agree with that, Russ. And I want to give the key takeaways, Russ. And I love that, to be honest with you. It's like, after I've learned, been observed, eventually when I'm on my own, it's my job and my duty almost to teach others. So the key takeaways I want people to get from this discussion. Now, mind you, guys, we kind of sped through it. There's some definitely a good course here that we can make very interactive. But the key takeaways here is officers progress through these stages. Their ability to connect the why behind their actions for strategic decision-making becomes second nature. Inmates testing decreases significantly as officers demonstrate competence, consistency, and confidence. Through mentorship, inclusivity, and opportunities for growth, correctional facilities can create leaders capable of maintaining safety, earning respect, and inspiring innovation within the field. And this is a structure that fosters a culture where rookies feel valued, empowered, and ultimately equipped to advance through every stage of their careers with discernment and professionalism. Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I think that the big takeaway that I would hope that some of the more advanced staff would glean from this is a way forward, a way for them to get to that level of mastery, for that ability of them to start passing on what they've learned, to start cloning themselves, to start having a real impact on corrections. That's where we need to be, and that's where we need to go if we're going to rescue corrections. Not all departments need rescuing. Not all departments are having the same issues as others. But in order to get there, in order to make corrections into something that number one serves the public, and number two serves the needs of the inmate population. Some of them obviously can't be salvaged, but there are some that can be, and that's where we need to go with things. But we can't do it with a bunch of interference from politicians and people that really truly don't have any deep and abiding understanding of what goes on in a correctional setting. So, I would urge all of you out there that are on this journey to become a master, to promote and take the reins and move forward, and try and put your institution or department or whatever on a better footing all along the way. And if we have more and more people do that, we'll be more and more successful in this endeavor.
Yeah, I love that, Russ. And guys, just in my closing comments, the discussion we had with Russ the other day led to me figuring out with Russ the gap. And again, these are just efforts to fill that gap. I mean, I've written a whole book on managing inmate behavior that you guys may want to check on, along with the other books I have. Please check in my description. But guys, these are not perfect dialogues. These are just areas that we haven't touched on before that we're just introducing. But I definitely think it leads us into the right direction. I think there's a lot of questions that we could still answer here. And maybe one day me and Russ will be willing to put together a course on this and then actually introduce it as a, whether we go on site or maybe we go online and do it through a Zoom teleconference or Zoom, virtual. But this is a course that really should be interactive, but you need people that are teaching it who understand the lesson. So even if you want to take this video, get a grasp of it, and go teach it out there yourselves, do it. But you got to make sure that you understand the lesson, because this is a teaching that has so many questions, and it's supposed to. So here we are putting the knowledge out there, but we do need people to grasp it and translate that knowledge to where it best applies. And one last thing here, that's the key. We develop these things for our own experiences, our own situations, then we put it out to the world. Your job is to apply it where it best fits. So here it is. And then I think another aspect is I'm learning so much now by going back, checking out my past videos and trying to see how I see things differently. And I think this was a great dialogue based on maybe a change from a prior thought I had about that min versus max. Where do you start somebody? If we're going to follow true with these lessons, especially the lessons from the managing inmate behavior, then I have to stick to the fact that it's good to put rookies in areas where inmates have stuff to lose so they can start their confidence from following policy and procedure, and not put them in areas where inmates don't have much to lose. And now their authority comes from kind of like how inmates gain things back. So discretionary. I can't expect a rookie to be able to utilize discretion when they really having a strong foundation in following policy and procedure. As always, guys, the show is taped up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.